right, so up next, we had a group of students working with the city of Peoria on a water conservation project. Larry Olson is with the Environmental Resource Management program of the Fulton School of Engineering. Oops.
So my name is Larry Olson. I'm the program chair for the Environmental and Resource Management program that is within the Fulton Schools of Engineering. We're based out at the Polytechnic campus. And in the ERM program, we have one kind of unique class. It's called a Water Resources Management class. It meets on Fridays and Saturdays once a month. And what's unique about it is that even though we do have ASU students in that class, it is primarily taught by practitioners, people that are in the water profession. And there are other folks in that are water professionals. They work for irrigation districts, they work for SRP, for the Central Arizona Project, for municipal water departments. We have people from agricultural farmers and power companies, other folks that are involved in that program. So it really gives the students an opportunity to rub elbows with folks that are already in the profession. And so this Project Cities effort that we're involved in is part of this class. So the students that are going to be presenting today are ASU students that are taking this class. And this is an opportunity for them to put to use a lot of the concepts that they've been learning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily. Are you going to take the lead in that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are from the ERM 598 Water Resource Management class. Our project is drought contingency and water conservation planning for the city of Peoria, Arizona. The primary purpose of this project is to assist the city of Peoria in knowing when and how to execute their drought contingency plan should a water shortage be declared, as well as sustainably plan for the future growth of the city.
First, we're going to cover a little bit of Peoria's water sources, and then I'll be talking about vulnerabilities and adaptive capacities of those water sources. So as you can see, majority of Peoria's water portfolio is CAP, SRP, followed by little bits of reclaim and Gila River Indian community. As such, I've really focused vulnerability assessment and adaptive capacities on the most prominent sources. So all the vulnerabilities to each source are quite similar, which is expected in the desert Southwest. 84% of Peoria's water is from CAP, SRP, and reclaim. All of the sources suffer from climate change, which is a major impact, obviously, on water in the desert Southwest. So I'll start with CAP. Colorado River has been in a drought. I think everybody knows that. And in 2007, the Secretary of Interior got together with the lower basin states and established the interim guidelines for lower basin shortages. And here you can see that Arizona is hit by far the hardest when it comes to Lake Mead levels. What's also important to note that there's a structural deficit of 1.2 million acre feet through the mid-2000s. And right now levels have been relatively stable due to average precipitation and increased water efforts. The guidelines are to be reviewed this year by the Secretary of Interior, and they expire in 2026. In addition, CAP also is subject to junior priority rights. So if the Colorado River has a shortage, they will be one of the first entities to lose water allotments. And they have a 3-step plan to minimize their impact in this situation on municipalities and industries. And the first is to reduce their underground storage activity and excess water deliveries, followed by diminishing agricultural allotments and then using their underground storage credits. Next slide. SRP delivers roughly 1 million acre feet to the Phoenix metro area, and 2.5% of that goes to Peoria. SRP had a vulnerability assessment conducted by Carpe Diem West in 2011, And it found that lower basin precipitation shortages are not offset by increases in precipitation in the upper basin. It also found that SRP should expect a 20 to 50% reduction in storage over the next 40 years due to decreases in precipitation and increased heat. So reclaim is obviously dependent on other sources, but it is vulnerable to foreign and domestic terrorism, cybersecurity especially. Georgia Institute of Technology did a small study on ransomware. They developed ransomware that could actually control wastewater treatment plants' programmable logic controllers. The students were capable of opening and closing valves, increasing and decreasing chlorine disinfection, and displaying false monitor readings. So cybersecurity is really key to reclaim. Next slide. So adaptive capacity from the IPCC is the ability of a system to adjust to climate change, to moderate potential damages, and to take advantage of opportunities or to cope with the consequences. I was not able to find any literature on SRP's adaptive capacity, but CAP conducted a climate action plan in 2018, and obviously adaptive capacity is included in that. And what the CAP climate action team did is identify 3 scenarios that are most likely to happen. And from there, they came up with consequences of each one of those scenarios. And they proposed 131 strategies for those consequences from those 3 scenarios. They then took those strategies, next slide, and categorized them by difficulty and separated them into 3 portfolios of action: no regrets, low regrets, and conditional portfolios. The first one is very easy, economical, very simple stuff. The second one has an element of risk, economical, and the third is large scale, things like desalinization plants. And their next steps are to implement the first 2 portfolios. Thank you.
Now let us go through some interdependencies of water supplies for the city of Peoria. The major source is CAP. There's CAP water in 2 reservoirs. One is Lake Powell, which is 42% full, and other is Lake Mead, which is 39% full. One important source for the water for Peoria, which city can use, is the groundwater. It has been reported that Peoria has stored over 100,000 acres of water underground over the last decade. However, it has been reported that groundwater levels throughout the Arizona have dropped more than 100 feet in over 2,000 different wells since they were first built. That is, which corresponds to about 1 in 4 wells. However, but use in case of emergency. SRP accounts for 36% of Peoria's water, that is 25,201 acre feet. Limitation with SRP water is that it can be used on the land originally irrigated by the SRP water, so it is not feasible to entirely depend on this source. Talking about the Gila River Indian Community lease, the Peoria receives 7,000 acre feet each year. The water is treated at the Pyramid Peak plant, and the lease extends next century. The water is considered replenishable as it is too supplied by Colorado River water. In case of cutoff, this source can impact the drought too. So we cannot entirely depend on this. The next one is the White Mountain Apache Tribe lease. Peoria receives a total of 1,249 acre feet per year. The Peoria receives water as a result of settlement negotiations. Peoria will lease water from the tribe for 100 years, and it can be too affected by the Colorado River water cutoff. So reusing wastewater or domestic wastewater or gray water is the best option that Peoria can implement. Using methods like Xeriscaping and tap to toilet approach can affect the water conservation too. Another source which can prove to be helpful is the Arizona Water Banking Authority. It was created in 1995, and after almost 2 decades, the AWBA has been storing excess Colorado River water in underground aquifers. According to a CAP report in 2014, AWBA has stored more than 3 million acre feet in central Arizona.
Hello, everyone. So I think studying how Peoria will continue to grow is a large key in making sure we make the needed educated decisions today that plan for some of the more unpredictable events of tomorrow. Next slide, please.
Hey folks, this is your 5-minute warning.
So going right off the bullet points on the left, we can estimate that Peoria's population will actually more than double over the next 30 years, and many, many more jobs will come into the area. So it's pretty apparent that Peoria's population is expected to balloon at a rate faster than ever before. By build out, we can see that more than 500,000 residents will be in Peoria around 2050. Well, what is just as important as this though, is where those residents will be staying. So looking at that map of Peoria to the right, those colorful splotches are the planned expansion areas and subdivisions. You can see that almost all of them are off the SRP project and going to need cap water. I believe the only major expansion area that is actually on SRP land is that giant blue downtown Peoria area. So if you're curious, the boundary for cap and SRP water is roughly at the thinnest point in that lower half of Peoria. Going into the projected water needs, we see that SRP provides roughly the same amount of water that cap does, but that isn't so much the issue. The issue is that Peoria will be primarily expanding on cap water land. So looking at the table, we can see that demand for water off project or on cap land is seriously starting to skyrocket come 2025. It gets even more wild as time progresses and these expansions are completed. Next slide, please. Okay, so I did some math to figure out the yearly requirements of water for both regions. So going year by year, green means it's currently providable given Peoria's water allowances, and red means it is too large and Peoria can't provide it. You can see that there will be an immediate problem rather than a latter one. By just 2025, Capland is already in the red. And this isn't even factoring in any sort of drought conditions or reduction to cap water. This is maximum cap supply. It just gets worse and worse as time goes on, with demand for water double than what is even supplyable by 2040.
Okay, so here we're going to talk about the drought management analysis and the triggers for each for each stage of the 4 stages. As we know, Peoria gets most of their water from the CAP, and in that case, they have only junior appropriation rights versus senior appropriation rights. Next one, thank you. So this slide kind of demonstrates the 2 different guidelines that we based this off of, and the tiers in which you have prior appropriation and priority over. The 2007 interim guidelines and the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan reached an agreement in which the prior appropriation laws will take effect at certain elevations of water within Lake Mead. This is based on at 1,075 feet. Arizona supply is reduced to 320,000 acre feet. At 1,050 feet, supply is reduced to 400,000 acre feet. And then at 1,025 feet, supply is reduced to 480,000 acre feet. The faucet is shut off per se at 1,025 feet because this leaves enough water to avoid creating dead pools within the lake itself near the dam. And at that point, there's no chance of any deliveries. And we share the water with California, Nevada, and Utah. So that's a huge issue for everybody. Next slide, please.
This is 2 minutes.
Okay, so at stage 1, the elevation at this point is below 1,075 feet. This isn't considered an insufficient water supply, it seems likely. At this point, the water services director will initiate a plan to work on educating the public about conservation measures, encouraging water-heavy businesses to kind of scale back, possibly using billing incentives. Non-essential uses like lawns, car washes, hard surface washes are limited to a predetermined time frame within the day. And stage 2 at 1,050 feet or below, it's triggered when there is considered a supply event occurring. The water service director will conduct water audits, find out who's using too much, fine for water use outside of enforcement hours, and approve surcharges for extreme misuse. Time frames are still the same, except they might be scaled back a little bit by day, but the hours might remain the same. Next slide, please. Okay, stage 3 is kind of like when we get into crisis mode. It is triggered when the elevation is at that 1,025 feet mark. In this stage, water supply no longer meets any demand on the CAP. And at this point, Peoria should be using groundwater credits sparingly. The Peoria WSD director will initiate surcharges on bills to curb excess use, both privately and publicly. And and the strict regulations in one place for usage with no non-essential use. Stage 4 is when we are below 1,025 feet. We are absolutely in crisis mode. Peoria should be entirely reliant on potable reuse and recycled resources, or face shutoff and expect community water distribution locations instead.
Looking at some of the ways we can save water is, I think, the most important part of this presentation. Let's get into it. So xeriscaping is an amazing way of conserving water. It's widely used in arid climates such as this one. Don't worry, it's not all just a few sparse cacti dotted around. There's a huge amount of variety for landscapers to work with, lots of colors, shapes, and sizes. So along with saving water, xeriscaping also saves time and money from its low maintenance requirements, and it helps support the indigenous wildlife. Personally, I think xeriscaping gives Arizona neighborhoods a unique look that will always resonate with me. So next slide, please. Here in the desert Southwest, we use a gargantuan 50% of our domestic water use just on outdoor watering, trying to simulate an environment that isn't natural to this area. I found that homes in Peoria use an average of about 110,000 gallons of water per year. So applying that 50% cut, we can eliminate 55,000 gallons of water. That's huge. So some studies have even found that xeriscaping can chop up to 75% of water and 120 gallons per day. So really, there's no limit to how much we can save using xeriscaping. And I think that we shouldn't just use it because of its water savings, but also because of the unique style and the impression that it gives for Arizona neighborhoods. Thank you.
All right, rainwater and stormwater harvesting. So rainwater is a valuable water resource because it's relatively clean, free, and easy to collect in large quantity. This photo here is an example of your standard rainwater harvesting system you could install on your home. So based on the numbers that we have for the annual precipitation in Peoria, along with the rainwater harvesting formula and other averages, we can estimate that the average size building can harvest about 1,165 gallons of rainwater per month. And later in the Q&A, we can give you some price estimates on this as well. Also, stormwater is another valuable resource that can be harvested, treated, and used to help augment the municipal water supply. Here are some real-life examples of strategies. This first image is from the city of Mesa. This is a curb cut and basin on the roadside. It's used to collect stormwater, and the stormwater provides water for vegetation, which improves the livability of the city. And the plants and soil also help filter out those contaminants. The second image is from Tucson. This is a rainwater harvesting system, and the city of Tucson has requirements for rainwater to be used for all outdoor plants for commercial buildings, and they may start requiring commercial buildings to rely on rainwater for 80% of their needs. They also offer rebates and educational workshops for homeowners as well. This last picture is the Terracina home development in Dripping Springs, Texas. And this home development uses individual rainwater harvesting systems. So every home is built with a rainwater harvesting system. And later in Q&A, we can give you some prices on those homes as well.
So another source of water reuse that can be used is gray water. Gray water is just the water from bathtubs and washing machines or sinks if you don't include the kitchen sink. Depending on family size, as much as 75% of a residential home water can be used with gray water. And in utilizing gray water, you can have your bills be reduced by up to 30 to 70% in a single family household. So this picture right here is just a standard laundry to landscape setup. This setup is about $100 to $250, and it's the easiest setup to implement in any future homes that are to be built. After this, the setups do get more intricate and more expensive as you move on to commercial builds. So some tax credits that Peoria might want to implement would be to definitely let the citizens know that the state of Arizona offers a one-time tax credit of 25% of the total cost of a system with a cap of $1,000, which will cover the standard laundry to landscape. After that, Tempe and Tucson have their own that you can really look at to implement. And additionally, there are some regulations and permits that will be needed in order to implement these systems. So these are just a few of the recommendations that we would need Peoria to look at for their future home development.
It will be exciting to see how the city of Peoria develops in the future and implements these innovative water conservation strategies. And implementing these kind of plans in their development will set them apart as a water conservation and sustainability leader in the state, the country, and the world. Thank you.
Wow, everyone. That was very well done. Y'all did a great job. Thank you so much. And I know, again, we're all nonverbal right now, but we all hear that round of applause. I am going to, let's activate Cape Powers to speak, just to introduce just some initial kind of thoughts on the presentation. And Cape, we have time if you have one follow-up question to pose that here. Go ahead, Cape.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys, well, first of all, great job with the presentation. I know that this class was impacted quite a bit by the COVID environment we're living in. So I really appreciate the time you guys put into it. I know you did a ton of it outside of class on your own. So really proud of that effort. Did you guys take a look at sort of overall quantities of water and how much maybe some of the things that you propose would use? And did you ever think, okay, do we actually have enough water? Are we going to get far enough along by implementing the strategies that you guys proposed? Or should we be in the market for more water?
Well, we do have some numbers on how much water that some of these systems could save or augment, but that is an area that we're further researching, is what that gap would be if we added those things, if there would still be a gap beyond that as well.
Great.